So this is an electric standing desk, and basically it has a motor so it can move up to a standing height or down to a sitting height. I was sent this to review for free. If you wanted to purchase it, it would cost you about $140. They say not to open it with a knife, so you have to be careful not to jam the knife down into the tabletop surface and hurt it. But if you're careful, you can open it with a knife. Alright, so inside we have, right up on top, the installation guide. And then we have a lot of pieces of metal, and it looks like this is a bend-your-own little metal tray. Plus we get lots of just angle iron, and then big leg pieces. And this is the leg piece that has a motor attached, and I assume there's going to be a rod that goes from that leg to the other leg to connect the motor to this side over here. Plus lots of other pieces of metal and leg bottoms and cross pieces and so forth. And of course there's lots of styrofoam bits. Here's the metal rod that goes between the different leg pieces, and it's extendable. We have a little cloth drawer that moves in and out of that folding bracket shelf thing. There's the power adapter, just plugs into the wall. And we have a couple of, looks like feet that can screw in and out for leveling, along with a bag of nicely labeled hardware, a control panel with three preset positions, a couple of cable hangers, and then underneath this styrofoam there are two pieces that make up the desktop. So your desktop is not solid. It basically has two separate pieces that hook together in the middle. And this is MDF covered with kind of a melamine type topping. And of course you have styrofoam peanuts, or little broken pieces of styrofoam, in the box as well. Alright, the instruction manual looks pretty well done so far. Pretty good illustrations, instructions in English. They have some other languages on the bottom. And, it looks very straightforward. There's several steps. You're going to be screwing things in. They suggest you provide your own drill or a screwdriver. But all in all, it looks pretty straightforward. Alright, step 2 is to put these bottom feet on, and they are asymmetrical, so you want the longer end opposite this back brace here. Just watch the pictures in the manual. Those 4 screws went in pretty easily. I had to struggle quite a bit with these 4, so the threads in that leg were much tighter for some reason. I got them in, but all 4 of them were too tight in my opinion. And these adjustable height feet just screw into there on all 4 of those holes, so you can, level this guy when you're done if your floor isn't perfectly level. They also keep these screws from touching the floor. Alright, step 3 involves using the other 4 A screws to put these 2 guys on the end that support the table. Alright, before we attach this transmission rod, we want to make sure that the legs are the same height. In my case, they were all the way down, so they are at the same height. And this guy just slips over the motor on that side, and then this end goes into the little hex thing on that side. And once you have it at the right distance, you tighten this up to keep it from falling out. And that guy just stays in place there. So the tabletop is split. to ship in the box they have, and that means you'll be attaching two pieces here together. They give you these little wooden dowels to kind of stick in. You want to make sure all these holes are all facing upwards, so the top of the table is facing down right now. And then you have to get these guys in to next to each other, and there's a plate that goes right here that locks them together. We're going to install this plate and a whole bunch of other things, basically the whole bottom leg portion to the tabletop here, along with the little control panel. And we need to provide our own Phillips head screwdriver, preferably on a drill. Pay attention to the picture. These two holes where the cables go in the back of the table are basically opposite the longer front leg segments, and that power transmission rod is to the front of that rear support beam that goes across. Alright, so make sure all four holes line up on both sides. These little cable connections are on the same side as this black metal piece here. And note that these tables, the two halves can still separate, so these things are going to hold them together at each end. So you need to push these together while you're screwing them in. Alright, now we have to fold this little drawer holder along the dashed lines and install these wire hooks at each end. So they do not include instructions on how to fold this guy. It looks pretty symmetrical, so I'm going to vacuum off the styrofoam. Since this side here has some scrapes on it, I'm going to put that on the inside, which means I want to fold this guy down and this guy down and this guy kind of in the same downward manner, and then these guys fold over and out. And it's super easy to fold this, so you know those little gaps there make it pretty simple. It's a little wiggly, but the screws holding it in place should line things up correctly. And this should be at the rear to stop the drawer from going in too far. We have one extra wooden dowel, one extra big-headed screw, and these wire hooks here are going to be going in with these four D screws. You might notice these hooks also span the gap in the table. So there's, you know, the hook and then these metal things and the metal plate in the center that all span the split in the table. The fabric drawer assembly is very easy, and then we just have to plug in two wires, so you know the power goes in and then the motor connector goes in. They include one of these adhesive strips to hook in there. Now the instructions show two strips, but they only provide one in the bag. Alright, the motor connector has 6 pins, and there's a hole where this guy goes in, so it's pretty clear that that's where the motor snaps. And this length here is relatively short. I don't really think it's going to hang down or fall. That might be why they omitted the sticky thing. And then the power supply over here is actually pretty darn short, so you're going to have an extension cord or an outlet right where this guy, you know, comes off if this table gets any high. And there's like a little connecty thing here that goes in that hole there, so it's pretty obvious that this guy snaps in there. And so that is the table assembled. Now we just have to flip it over and put it where we want it. Alright, so assembly took about 50 minutes. So I'd say, you know, budget an hour to an hour and a half for assembly. Alright, so this is how much distance you have to find an outlet from your table. So probably 5 feet or so. Alright, the controller looks pretty easy to use. You push any key, it powers on, you long press the up or down button to move up or down until you release it. If you want to set a preset memory location 1, 2, or 3, you hold the button down for several seconds until it says S dash the number, and then if you just tap that number, it'll go back to that preset location. It says to reset it, you can long press the down for 5 seconds. It'll display RES, and the desk goes down to the lowest height, and its height will be reset to 28.3 inches. So if the height out of the box isn't right, you press and hold the down button until you get reset, and it'll fix it. There's also a child lock. If you hold both buttons down for 5 seconds, it'll say lock, and then basically it will lock in its current position. You push and hold for 5 seconds to unlock it. This is the lowest position at about 28.5 inches. And when you push a button to move it, it shows you the measurement here, and it is 28.5. And you can just push and hold this, and it moves to whatever amount of inches high you want. I've pre-programmed in some positions. So this guy here is 46.5, and that's the highest level. So it's not like super fast, but it only takes 20 seconds or so to go all the way from low to high. So it's certainly fast enough for changing the height here and there. So right there is about 46.5. If you hold it up, it basically won't go up any higher. So that is the highest setting there. So the little LED lights go out after about 5 or 10 seconds of you not using it. But basically I suspect most people will just set 1 or 2 heights that they switch between and then just push the button and switch between the different heights. I like that when you push the buttons, it tells you what height it's going to, and then it flips over and shows you the height it's currently at. Alright, so this little metal hanger here, if you push on it, it can wiggle a little bit. Mine doesn't look like I bent it at perfectly right angles, but I think if I push on it, I can probably fix that. This slides in and out very easily. It's not going to come out accidentally. It's easy to pull out. It doesn't go in too far because there's that piece on the back that stops it. It's not a real drawer, but it's plenty for keeping, some pins and cords and cables and, the various, stuff you don't want to put on top of the desk. So it's functional. It's obviously built for this price point, but it still works pretty well. All right, so the leg mechanism works well. It's relatively steady. Obviously there's a split in the tabletop, and I think kind of one of the places that they cut to hit their price point is the tabletop quality. It's MDF, it's covered, it has the split down the center. There's plenty of metal brackets and screws holding that together, but you do have, that visible seam there, and you can feel it when you run your fingers over it. Not a big deal, but, if you pay a little more, you can probably get a fancier, full, solid wooden tabletop. Now, it's always possible you can unscrew this tabletop and screw your own tabletop on top of the leg mechanism. You could probably even reuse this drawer hanger with it. So if you don't like that tabletop, it's perfectly replaceable. Okay, these cable pass-throughs, you can either pull the entire thing out, so you can push like a big plug all the way through, and then this guy you can push down and rotate and pass just like the cable through that thing. And it just kind of snaps in place like that, and then you can pull it up by popping it in from the bottom. Now if you push down too hard, it will pop this little plastic thing out and the spring goes flying, but it snapped back in place pretty well. So I added one of these little stick-on cable clips, and that's just because I have a magnetic attachment point, and so I wanted a little bit of extra friction here so the cable wouldn't move in and out while the table was going up and down. So it takes about 17 seconds to go from my standing working height down to the not blocking the window height. Now I have found one little blemish on the tabletop. It's possible I did this when I was assembling it, if there was something on my table that I put this on top of. I don't remember it being there coming out of the box. It's kind of small. I don't think I've put anything on top of the table that would cause that, but there is a blemish here. I can't say for sure that wasn't caused by me when I assembled it. Alright, I'm pretty happy with this guy. It's stable enough I can type on it, it doesn't vibrate when I'm typing. Control panel is really easy to use, goes up and down pretty quick, it's not super noisy. You know, it's at the lower end of the price point for the movable tables. There are a few, you know, cuts made where like they have the split tabletop, you have to assemble it yourself and so forth. But I think it's a pretty good value at this price point.